The assessment. The holographic display flickered in the dimly lit chamber as Senior Research Director Vexna adjusted her optical sensors. The massive data stream from Earth continued to pour in, filling the circular room with a soft blue glow. She had spent the last 3 cycles analyzing this backwater planet, and her findings were peculiar. "Begin recording," she commanded. Assessment report. Sol 3, designated Earth. Primary species analysis. Homo sapiens. The computer chirped in acknowledgement as Vexna's slender gray fingers danced across the floating interface. Behind her, the Council of Scientific Excellence waited in silence, their crystalline bodies reflecting the holographic light in fractured patterns across the chamber walls. "The specimens present an interesting contradiction," she continued. "Their technological development is barely a Class II, yet they display remarkable cognitive adaptability. They lack natural defenses, no claws, minimal muscle density compared to galactic standards, and absolutely no biological redundancy. By all measures, they should have been prey species." She pulled up a series of images. Humans building shelters in every climate zone, crafting tools from seemingly unsuitable materials, and surviving in conditions that should have been lethal. However, they've managed to become the dominant species on their planet through tool use and what appears to be sheer stubbornness. One of the council members shifted, their crystalline form chiming softly. "Your recommendation, Director." Vexna's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as she considered her response. They represent an excellent opportunity for the advancement initiative. Their physical limitations make them ideal test subjects, easily contained, no significant natural weapons, and their primitive technology poses no threat to our containment systems. She highlighted a particular data set. Most importantly, they display remarkable problem-solving capabilities. The data suggests they can improvise solutions with limited resources, a trait that could be valuable if we can isolate and study its biological basis. The council members communicated among themselves in subtle crystalline harmonics before the chief counselor spoke. "Your proposal?" "A controlled acquisition program," Vexna replied, bringing up a detailed operation plan. "We select isolated specimens, conduct our research, and return them with no memory of the experience. Their primitive detection systems won't even register our presence." She displayed a map of Earth with highlighted regions. "I've identified optimal extraction zones where we can operate without detection. Their population is scattered enough that disappearances can be attributed to natural causes." The chief counselor's crystalline form pulsed with approval. "Very well. You may proceed with preliminary acquisitions. Standard containment protocols should be more than sufficient." Vexna's mouthparts clicked in satisfaction as she finalized the operation parameters. Everything was perfectly planned, every variable accounted for. The specimens would be secured in state-of-the-art containment cells, studied and returned. Simple, efficient, and completely safe. The research vessel, Eternal Inquiry, shifted into position above Earth's atmosphere, its advanced cloaking systems rendering it invisible to the primitive scanning technology below. Vexna supervised as the acquisition team prepared their equipment. Neural suppressors, molecular transport beams, and backup containment fields that could hold creatures 10 times stronger than any human. "Remember," she instructed the team, "these are primitive beings. They may display fear responses, but they pose no actual threat. Our priority is clean acquisition and minimal environmental impact." As the first team prepared to descend, Vexna made one final note in her log. "Beginning project understanding, investigating human adaptability and problem-solving capabilities. Security level minimal. Expected resistance, none." She would later look back on those words with a bitter appreciation for irony. The humans had already taught her their first lesson, though she didn't realize it yet. Appearances can be deceiving. As the acquisition team vanished in a flash of transport energy, none of them suspected that they weren't beginning a research project. They were starting a war. And their first target, Dr. Sarah Chen, former military research scientist and current retired consultant, was about to prove just how wrong their assessment had been. The hunt begins. The molecular transport beam illuminated the small cabin's interior with an eerie purple glow. 3 acquisition specialists materialized silently, their adaptive camouflage immediately adjusting to the darkness. The target's biosignature registered clearly on their sensors. A single human female, supposedly asleep in the bedroom. Lead acquisitioner Keltar checked the readings again. Everything about this operation was standard procedure. Isolated location in the mountains, single subject, no nearby settlements. They had performed hundreds of similar acquisitions across dozens of worlds. This would be no different. The team moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency, their footsteps completely silent thanks to their gravity manipulation fields. The bedroom door was closed. Keltar signaled his team to take position as he reached for the handle. The door opened to reveal an empty bed. A small red light blinked in the corner of the room. Motion sensors. Dr. Sarah Chen's voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Primitive technology, right? The acquisition team's combat training kicked in immediately. They moved to defensive positions, scanning for threats with their advanced optical systems. Their target was supposed to be a simple researcher, yet something in her voice made Keltar's spine ridges tingle with ancient instincts. Fascinating technology you have there, Chen continued, still unseen. The way your camouflage adapts to the environment. Almost perfect. Almost. A series of metallic clicks echoed through the cabin. Keltar recognized the sound from their cultural briefings. Primitive human firearms. His team's defensive shields could easily handle such weapons. "You're making a mistake," Keltar announced, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into human speech. "We mean you no harm. Our containment protocols are completely humane." A laugh echoed through the cabin. "Containment protocols? Is that what you call kidnapping where you come from?" Something small and cylindrical rolled into the room. Keltar's sensor suite identified it as harmless. No explosives, no energy signatures, just a small metal tube. Then it released a dense cloud of fine powder into the air. "Your camouflage adapts to light and shadow," Chen's voice explained casually. "But it still displaces matter. Like dust, or in this case, fine aluminum powder." The cloud revealed 3 distinct humanoid shapes in the darkness. Keltar realized their mistake too late. They had just lost their primary advantage. The first shot caught Zelliman in what passed for his shoulder, the primitive projectile barely penetrating his protective field. But it was enough to disrupt his camouflage completely, leaving him visible and disoriented. "Fascinating," Chen's voice continued, now clearly coming from above them. "Your shields are calibrated for energy weapons, aren't they? High-velocity kinetic impacts, but they struggle with slower projectiles, like simple bullets." Keltar tried to activate his neural suppressor, sweeping it across the cabin's interior. The human's vital signs remained frustratingly absent from his sensors. "Looking for my biosignature." There was almost amusement in her voice now. "Did you really think a military research scientist wouldn't know how to mask vital signs? We've been preparing for people like you for decades." The second shot took out their molecular transport beacon. The third destroyed their long-range communicator. Each shot was precise, deliberate, targeting systems rather than the team members themselves. "Full spectrum scan," Keltar ordered, trying to regain control of the situation. "She's one primitive human. Find her." "About that," Chen's voice had moved again. "Did your assessment mention human pack-bonding behaviors? Our tendency to form communities, to share information?" Multiple red dots appeared on Keltar's chest, laser sights from different angles. The cabin was surrounded. "You thought you found an isolated researcher," Chen continued. "What you actually found was a testing ground. We've been watching your ship for weeks, tracking your movements, analyzing your technology. Every person you thought was an isolated target was one of us, waiting, learning." The cabin's lights suddenly blazed to full brightness, revealing Chen standing in a doorway, wearing what appeared to be primitive body armor. But Keltar's sensors revealed something more disturbing. The armor incorporated salvaged pieces of their own technology. "Now," she said, holding up what appeared to be a modified version of their own neural suppressor, "let's discuss this research project of yours. I have so many questions about your species, and you're going to help me answer them." The last thing Keltar saw before losing consciousness was Chen speaking into a communication device. "Control, this is Test Site 7. Package secured. Tell the others to spring their traps. It's time to go hunting." In her observation chamber aboard the Eternal Inquiry, Vexna watched in horror as acquisition team after acquisition team went dark. Each target they had so carefully selected, each isolated human they had marked for study, turned out to be part of an interconnected web of resistance. They hadn't been finding vulnerable specimens. They had been walking into carefully prepared ambushes. As emergency signals flooded her displays, Vexna finally understood their mistake. They had evaluated humans as individuals, measuring their physical capabilities and technological limitations. But they had failed to account for humanity's greatest weapon, their ability to work together, to share knowledge, to learn, and to turn an enemy's strength into a weakness. The hunt had indeed begun, but the roles of hunter and prey were not what they had expected. Tables turned. Aboard the Eternal Inquiry, Vexna's research chamber had transformed into a crisis control center. Emergency alerts flashed across every display as more acquisition teams went dark. The Council's crystalline forms pulsed with agitation as they processed the mounting disaster. "Impossible," one council member chimed. "Their technology is primitive. Their weapons are ineffective. How are they doing this?" Vexna's fingers flew across the holographic interfaces, trying to make sense of the fragmented data streaming in. Each failed acquisition attempt followed the same pattern. Teams would arrive at their targets, communications would become erratic, and then nothing. "Director," her assistant interrupted, "we're detecting unusual energy signatures from the surface. They match our molecular transport technology, but the patterns are wrong." Before Vexna could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Security barriers activated automatically as unauthorized transport signatures appeared in multiple locations. The impossible was happening. The humans were boarding their vessel. In the ship's medical bay, Dr. Sarah Chen materialized with her team, their modified transport devices humming with stolen power. They wore a patchwork of human tactical gear and salvaged alien technology, each piece reverse-engineered from captured equipment. Security teams responding to decks 3 through 7. The ship's AI announced in its melodic alien language. Chen smiled as the translation played through her modified neural link. Another gift from their unwitting benefactors. "Right on schedule," she murmured, checking her tablet. The screen displayed a complete schematic of the Eternal Inquiry, courtesy of data extracted from the captured acquisition team. Team 2, begin electronic warfare procedures. Team 3, move to engineering. Remember, disable, don't destroy. We need their technology intact. Across the ship, other human strike teams appeared, each targeting specific systems and sections. They moved with practiced precision, using the aliens' own neural suppressors and containment fields against them. The ship's crew, never trained for internal combat, found themselves woefully unprepared for human military tactics. In her crisis center, Vexna watched in horror as system after system fell under human control. Their security protocols, designed to defend against advanced cyber attacks and energy weapons, proved vulnerable to primitive physical sabotage and repurposed technology. "How are they understanding our systems so quickly?" a council member demanded. "They shouldn't be capable of comprehending our technology, let alone using it. You still don't understand humans, do you?" Chen's voice came through the ship's communication system. "We've spent our entire history taking things apart to see how they work. Every piece of technology you used against us became a learning opportunity. Every failed acquisition gave us more tools, more data." Security barriers sealed the crisis center as Vexna initiated emergency protocols. But she could already hear the human teams breaching adjacent sections. They weren't using brute force. They were systematically disabling security measures using the ship's own maintenance systems. Your containment fields taught us about your energy manipulation technology, Chen continued. Your neural suppressors revealed your understanding of consciousness and biology. Every time you tried to study us, we were studying you. The door to the crisis center shimmered and disappeared. Molecular deconstruction, using the ship's own transport technology. Chen stepped through, leading a team of humans equipped with a hybrid of Earth and alien technology. The council members retreated, their crystalline forms resonating with fear frequencies. Fascinating architecture, Chen commented, looking around the chamber. The crystalline computing matrices, the photonic neural networks. We're going to learn so much from all of this. Vexna stood her ground, her 4 eyes fixed on the human leader. What do you want from us? Originally, we just wanted you to leave us alone, Chen replied, examining a floating holographic display with professional interest. But then we saw your database, all the other species you've been studying. The experiments, the abductions, the casual disregard for sentient rights. She turned to face Vexna, and her expression hardened. So we decided to do something about it. Your ship's technology will help us advance our own capabilities by centuries, and its database will help us locate and free every species you've been terrorizing. You're making a mistake, Vexna warned. There are more ships, more research stations. You can't possibly think you can challenge our entire civilization. Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. That's exactly what you thought about challenging one primitive human, wasn't it? How did that work out? She gestured to her team, who began securing the alien crew with their own containment technology. Besides, we don't need to challenge your entire civilization. Not when we can simply show all those other species you've been experimenting on how to fight back. Imagine what they'll accomplish with the knowledge we're about to share. As Vexna was led away, she finally understood the full magnitude of their mistake. They hadn't just underestimated human physical capabilities or their technological potential. They had failed to grasp humanity's most dangerous trait, their instinct to not just resist oppression, but to actively fight against it, not just for themselves, but for others. The humans hadn't just turned the tables, they had changed the entire game. The prey becomes predator. The captured research vessel Eternal Inquiry hung in high orbit above Earth, its sleek form now bristling with hastily added human modifications. In what was once Vexna's private laboratory, Dr. Chen stood before a gathering of military and scientific leaders from across the globe. Holographic displays showed the locations of dozens of alien research stations scattered throughout the galaxy. Each of these facilities, Chen explained, manipulating the display with practiced ease, contains members of different species being held for research. Some have been there for what we consider years. The good news is that we now have access to their entire transportation network. A gruff general leaned forward. And you're certain we can trust this information? This isn't some kind of trap. Chen gestured to their captive aliens. Vexna and her council members watched from within their containment field, their crystalline forms dulled with defeat. Our guests have been quite cooperative, especially after we demonstrated our ability to disrupt their crystalline neural patterns without causing permanent damage. Isn't that right, Director? Vexna's form pulsed weakly in acknowledgement. She had watched in astonishment as the humans mastered alien technology in weeks that had taken her species centuries to develop. They didn't just copy, they improved, combined, and reimagined every piece of technology they captured. We've already made contact with resistance movements on 3 different worlds, Chen continued. Turns out we weren't the only ones fighting back. We were just the first to succeed on this scale. Now we can share what we've learned. The displays shifted to show alien worlds where other species were being held and studied. The humans had begun transmitting their knowledge, how to detect the research vessels, how to counteract their technology, and most importantly, how to fight back. The Eternal Inquiry wasn't just a research vessel, Chen explained. It was part of a larger network. Every piece of data we've extracted has given us locations of other facilities, security protocols, and transportation routes. We're not just freeing captives, we're dismantling their entire operation. In the 3 weeks since the ship's capture, human-led strike teams had liberated research stations across 2 star systems. Each success brought more allies, more technology, and more intelligence about the vast network of alien scientific exploitation. They believed their biggest advantage was their technological superiority, Chen said, pulling up footage from their latest raid. They never considered that this same technology, in the hands of those they considered primitive, could be used in ways they never imagined. The footage showed human teams working alongside newly freed alien species, combining Earth military tactics with advanced technology. Former research subjects were turning their intimate knowledge of the facility's layouts and procedures against their captors. But our greatest weapon isn't the technology we've captured, Chen continued. It's what they dismissed as our greatest weakness, our diversity, our adaptability, our willingness to cooperate with others. Every species they've held captive brings new perspectives, new ways of thinking, new possibilities. A scientist raised her hand. What about repercussions? Surely their civilization won't stand for this. Chen's expression hardened. That's the interesting part. According to our guests, there is significant division within their society about these research programs. Many of their own people consider them unethical. By exposing their operations, we're not just fighting them, we're forcing them to confront their own moral failings. She pulled up new data showing the spreading impact of their actions. News of the human resistance had sparked protests on the aliens' homeworld. Other species, long considered too primitive to matter, were beginning to be seen in a new light. They thought they were studying us, Chen said, her voice firm. Instead, they're learning from us. Learning that technological advancement without ethical progress is meaningless. Learning that cooperation is stronger than domination. Learning that every species, no matter how primitive they might appear, has the potential to surprise you. The displays showed their next targets, larger research facilities deeper in alien territory, but now they wouldn't be going alone. Former captives from a dozen different species had joined their cause, each bringing their own unique abilities and knowledge to the fight. We're no longer just defending Earth, Chen concluded. We're changing the galaxy. And we're doing it not by being stronger or more advanced, but by being what they never expected, teachers, allies, and liberators. As the meeting concluded, Chen approached the containment field holding Vexna and her council. I hope you're paying attention, she said quietly. This is what happens when you underestimate a species' capacity for growth. We're not just stopping your research, we're rewriting your conclusions. And your first lesson is almost complete. The former director of research watched as humans and their new alien allies prepared for their next operation. In her long career of studying other species, she had never imagined becoming the subject of study herself. But as she observed their methods, their cooperation, their innovative use of technology, she realized she was witnessing something unprecedented. The birth of a new force in the galaxy, sparked by a single species that refused to accept the role of prey. A lesson in humanity. 6 months after the capture of the Eternal Inquiry, the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Scientific Council buzzed with an unprecedented variety of life forms. Species that had once been merely subjects of study now sat as equals alongside their former researchers. At the center of it all stood Dr. Sarah Chen, preparing to address the emergency session of the Council. The crystalline beings who had once dismissed humanity as primitive now shared their chamber with representatives from Earth and dozens of formerly subjugated species. The hall's advanced translation systems worked overtime, converting a symphony of different languages into mutually understandable communication. Distinguished members of the Council, Chen began, her voice carrying across the vast chamber. We stand here today not as conquerors or revolutionaries, but as teachers. In the past 6 months, humanity has demonstrated something your research failed to quantify: the power of collective action and ethical progress. Holographic displays materialized around the chamber, showing the transformation that had swept through known space. Research facilities had been converted into cultural exchange centers. Former captives now worked alongside their previous captors, sharing knowledge and perspectives that had once been dismissed as primitive. Your civilization's greatest mistake, Chen continued, wasn't in underestimating our physical capabilities or our technological potential. It was in failing to understand that true advancement comes not from studying others as specimens, but from learning from them as equals. She gestured to the diverse gathering. A species of gaseous beings that had once been contained in research tanks now floated freely, their atmospheric manipulation abilities proving invaluable in joint operations. Crystalline beings like the council members sat next to silicon-based life forms they had once considered too primitive to acknowledge. In attempting to study us, you provided humanity with its greatest opportunity, the chance to demonstrate that cooperation transcends technological advancement. Every species you dismissed as primitive brought unique perspectives and abilities to our alliance. Together, we've achieved more in 6 months than your research programs did in centuries. The displays shifted to show the new initiatives born from this cooperation. Hybrid technologies combining the innovations of multiple species, medical breakthroughs achieved through collaborative research, diplomatic frameworks that recognized and respected the rights of all sentient beings. But perhaps our most important achievement, Chen said, her voice softening, has been the change we've inspired within your own society. Your people have begun to question the ethics of superiority that drove your research. They've started to see the value and diversity in learning from those they once dismissed. Vexna, no longer a research director but now serving as a liaison between the old order and the new, stepped forward. Dr. Chen speaks truth that we should have recognized long ago. Our pursuit of knowledge became tainted by arrogance. We forgot that true understanding comes not from observation alone, but from engagement, respect, and mutual exchange. The chamber filled with murmurs of agreement from various species. Even those who had initially resisted the changes couldn't deny the progress that had been made. Technologies had advanced more rapidly through cooperation than they ever had through forced study. Cultural exchanges had led to innovations that neither side could have achieved alone. Today, Chen announced, we propose a new framework for galactic cooperation. No more research subjects. No more primitive species classifications. Instead, we create a council where all sentient beings have a voice, where advancement comes through mutual respect and understanding. She activated one final display, showing the proposed structure for this new galactic organization. Humanity's greatest strength was never in our physical capabilities or our technology. It was in our ability to adapt, to cooperate, and to recognize the value in others. These are the traits that transformed us from your research subjects into your teachers. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of approval expressed in dozens of different ways. Crystalline chimes, atmospheric vibrations, neural pulses, and more traditional applause. Species that had once been isolated in research facilities now stood together, ready to forge a new future. As the session concluded, Shen found herself standing with Vexna, watching the diverse gathering of species interact. You know, Chen said, your original research question wasn't wrong. You just asked it the wrong way. You wanted to understand what made other species tick. The answer was simple. We all want the same thing. To learn, to grow, to connect. Vexna's crystalline form pulsed with acknowledgement. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson humanity has taught us. True understanding cannot be achieved through observation alone. It requires participation, empathy, and the willingness to see others not as subjects to be studied, but as teachers from whom we can learn. The story of humanity's transformation from research subjects to galactic teachers would be remembered for generations across countless worlds. It served as a reminder that true strength lies not in technological superiority or physical power, but in the ability to bring others together, to learn from differences, and to transform adversity into opportunity. In the end, the species that had been dismissed as primitive had taught the most advanced civilization in known space its most important lesson. The greatest discoveries come not from studying others, but from learning with them.